The early morning sunlight filtered softly through the white curtains of Margaret Hayes's small apartment in Charleston, South Carolina. The city was already alive, seagulls calling, waves brushing the shore, but Margaret, now 68, sat quietly with her cup of chamomile tea, staring at the dress hanging in the corner of the room. It was the same sky blue dress she had worn 45 years ago, the night her whole life had changed. She hadn't touched it in decades. It carried too many memories, laughter, tears, promises, and the one goodbye that still echoed in her heart. Back then, she was Margaret Foster, a 23-year-old music teacher with stars in her eyes. She'd just started working at Charleston High, where she met James Walker, a young journalist who had just returned from New York, chasing stories and sunsets. Their connection had been instant, the kind that didn't need words. One afternoon, when she stayed late practicing the piano, he'd stopped by, drawn by the melody. "You play like the ocean," he had said with that crooked smile. "Beautiful, but unpredictable." She laughed that day, and that's how it all began. For 3 years, they were inseparable. Summers spent walking by the pier, winters by the fire with books and old records. He'd bring her daisies every Friday, because roses are too proud, he'd say. And one evening, under the golden lights of the city festival, Margaret wore the dress for the first time, the blue one that made her feel like a part of the sky. That was the night he told her he loved her. But life had other plans. Just a few months later, James received an overseas offer, a reporting assignment in Europe. "It's only for a year," he had promised. "We'll write, we'll call, then I'll come back, and we'll build everything we dreamed of." But the letters stopped after 6 months. No calls, no return, and just like that, he was gone. Margaret waited. 1 year became 5, 5 became 10. Eventually, she stopped counting. She buried herself in her students, her music, and the quiet rhythm of life. Now, decades later, as the light touched the blue dress again, she felt something stir inside her. Not sorrow, something gentler. Maybe hope. The city was hosting its Heritage Music Festival that week, the same event she and James had once attended. She'd been invited to perform as a guest pianist, a tribute to her long career. For reasons she couldn't explain, Margaret found herself standing before the old mirror, holding the blue dress against her. It still fit. Her silver hair framed her face softly, her eyes still carried that same spark. When she looked at her reflection, she didn't see an old woman. She saw her younger self, still waiting for one more dance. That evening, the hall was filled with music and laughter. Margaret walked onto the stage, the blue dress shimmering under the lights. The piano keys felt familiar beneath her fingers, like coming home. As she played, the room seemed to fade. She closed her eyes and let the melody take her back, to that night, that smile, that promise. And then, she heard it. A soft voice from the back of the hall. "Margaret." Her hands froze mid-note. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it. But when she turned, her breath caught. There he was, James Walker, older, gray-haired, a little thinner, but unmistakably him. His eyes were glistening, just as hers were. After the performance, they met outside beneath the same old oak tree near the harbor. For a long moment, neither spoke. The years hung between them like a fragile thread. "You never came back," she finally whispered. His voice trembled. "I tried. The plane crashed in Europe. I was one of the few who survived. Spent months in recovery. They thought I was gone. By the time I returned, I couldn't find you. Your number had changed. Your school said you'd moved." Margaret felt her eyes well up. "So you stopped looking?" He shook his head. "Never. I searched every year when I came to Charleston. I'd sit by the pier, hoping I'd see you. I didn't even know you still lived here." Her hands trembled slightly. "I stopped waiting after a while." James reached out and gently took her hand, the same way he used to, decades ago. "But your music kept me alive. I still remember every note you ever played." She smiled faintly. "I thought I'd never wear this dress again." He looked at her, his eyes soft. "You make it look even more beautiful now." They walked by the harbor until the sun melted into the horizon. It was quiet except for the sound of the waves. Margaret finally asked. So, what now? James took a deep breath. I'm not leaving again. I've bought a small house near the coast. Maybe it's not too late to start again, not as we were, but as we are. Margaret looked out at the sea, the wind brushing her silver hair. People will say we're too old for beginnings. He chuckled. Then let them talk. We'll just keep walking. Dash dash dash. Over the next few months, they rebuilt what time had scattered. They went on small trips, shared breakfasts on the porch, and played music in the evenings. Sometimes, when James read his old travel journals aloud, Margaret would laugh until she cried. Other times, they just sat in silence, the kind that needed no words. One night, as the rain fell softly outside, she asked him, "Do you ever think about what could have been?" He smiled. "All the time. But now I think about what still can be." She leaned her head on his shoulder, her blue dress folded neatly in her lap, not as a memory anymore, but as a symbol of everything that endured. Dash dash dash. When spring arrived, the city held the festival again. This time, Margaret didn't play alone. James stood beside her, narrating his travel story while she played in the background. The audience cheered when they finished, and for a moment, it felt like they were 20 again. Afterward, as they stood under the same lights where it all began, James looked at her and said, 45 years ago, I told you I loved you under these lights. It feels right to say it again." Margaret smiled, her eyes glistening. And this time, she whispered, "You don't have to leave." He took her hands gently. Never again. The crowd around them faded, the music swelled, and as they danced, slow, steady, and full of quiet joy, the years disappeared. Dash dash dash. Because love, real love, doesn't end with age. It only pauses, waiting for the right song to begin again. And for Margaret and James, that song played beneath the Charleston sky, where an old blue dress and an old promise finally found their way home.